we don't come to this world to just work. Like, like work should be a part of a tool to support the lifestyle that we want to live. So I think it should be the other way around.
Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. My name is Isabel, your podcast host, and I'm here to find stories that challenge biases we face every day. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. On today's episode, we have Mandy Pao, a Hong Kong purpose-driven brand coach who is also the founder of EQ International Agency and aligned entrepreneur. She joins us to talk about why you should work to live and not live to work, and practical tips to manage burnout. Welcome back to Proudly Asian. As some of you might know, October 10th is World Mental Health Day. So for this October, we are going to do a series of episodes that focus primarily on different aspects of mental health. And if you have any specific questions or topics that you would like to hear about mental health on the show, please feel free to reach out to us on social media and we can chat a little bit more about that. And as you can see in the title, we are going to once again address the topic of burnout. And if some of you have been around for quite some time, you know that last year we did an episode specifically about burnout and a lot of you liked it and responded to it. So we're going to continue talking about burnout because frankly, we don't talk about burnout enough. But that also doesn't mean that people around the world are not experiencing burnout. It's actually quite the opposite because a 2022 McKinsey report says a quarter of surveyed workers across 15 countries around the world have experienced burnout symptoms. And Asian countries have been hit particularly hard by burnout and poor mental health conditions, and with 1 in 3 reporting that they have had experienced burnout. So while burnout is not yet declared as a medical condition or emergency, you're likely not going to continue having really good mental or physical health if you are burnt out. So for this episode, I'm very glad to be bringing in Mandy, an accomplished branding professional and entrepreneur who's had her fair share of burnout and has been quite vocal about her experience dealing with burnout. So welcome to Proudly Asian, Mandy. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Isabel.
Yeah, I'm definitely very curious about your personal experience dealing with burnout, and also you have helped some of your clients dealing with that as well. But before we get into that, for our listeners, we would like to know a little bit more about you. So why don't you tell us about your background? Who are you? What are you? And where did you grow up?
Cool. Yeah, sure. I think I have to kind of like started back in 10 years ago and probably, lead into who I am and why it brings me to this like burnout experience and why I am who I am today. So I guess I'll start with after my graduation, I studied in the UK and then I got back to Hong Kong. The first job that I got into, it's very glamorous kind of like job. So I work in a luxury fashion PR company in Hong Kong. Back then it's a leading company in Hong Kong. Without any direction, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I just kind of like trying it out and see what I like and what I don't like. So after 1 year of trying, I was kind of, I think it's a really, it's a really drastic change for me from UK to Hong Kong, full speed PR kind of like, like scene. So that I think I remember that year I was just feeling completely overwhelmed. And I think probably 6 months into my job, I have decided it's not for me. But because I wanted to kind of have 1 year full experience on my resume, so I kind of just like stay for 1 year. And on the on the day that I complete the exact day, I basically hand in my letter to my HR, and I said like, yeah, I really don't think this job is for me, but thanks for the experience. And so I remember the HR was telling me, are you sure you wanted to quit at this day? Because if you stay one more week, you can get double bonus. So I was like, no, I just want to leave as soon as possible. So I basically just say no to the double bonus. And I guess that's probably the first kind of like experience where I was started to feel like the Hong Kong working culture is a little bit overwhelmed. And that experience also brought me into a realization that I have to find something that I truly enjoy and truly like. Because otherwise, like we spend like 8 hours at work every day. Like if you really don't like what you're doing, you're kind of like torturing yourself most of the day, really. So that's basically my first realization, which I'm still very grateful for the opportunity and the experience and like the realization that I've got throughout the job. And then I kind of just like went around kind of just trying different thing and still trying in the PR industry. And I got really lucky that I got invited by one of my acquaintances back then to help with a project. So my first freelancing project is a red carpet event for Transformer in Hong Kong. So I work with the whole Hollywood team and stuff like that. So it was fun. Again, like it's really glamorous and it's really fun. But later on after the event, I'd also feel like it's such a good experience. I was very grateful because at that age, a lot of people probably would dream of having such experience like how I've done and what I've did and who I work with. But I guess with the experience, again, it just kind of like proved to me that I just really didn't really enjoy that kind of, like big crowd scene. I need to be always like really out there. And I just know that for my personality, I would much rather prefer a one-on-one, more authentic kind of like connection setting. So I guess after that, I then basically got into F&B PR, which I found it really, really fun and I really like it. So I think at that point I was like, oh, okay, like, so it's not that I don't like being a PR, it's just the format of how I do it. And the reason why I like it is because I get to sit down with the chef and I get to, understand, oh, what's your concept of the restaurants and, how did you come up with this recipe? And I'm kind of like acting like a storyteller to help them to write the press release and, connect them with the media and also like invite bloggers to go to the restaurants to try the dishes. So I actually really like it. So I think, oh, okay, like, like finally I realize what I like and what I don't like and where is my strength and weakness. And I just kind of like leverage on that. So I guess throughout that period of time, it's a lot for me to take on, especially at the age that I was. And yeah, I guess that basically brings me to I started my creative agency, and not long later after my freelancing journey, because of I really like what I've done. So I've just got like a lot of clients coming to me. So I was like, okay, I feel like it's time for me to really start an agency. So that's how I've decided to start a creative agency called EQ International. And that's, I think that's kind of like a new chapter for me. And that's also another side of story for me of how it got me into like the serious burnout that I actually experienced last year at the end of 2022. At first, when I started EQ International, it was more kind of like, I have a mission and I was having a vision that I wanted to help with more client or more like a holistic perspective of brand building. So I basically come up with the whole kind of what I call like EQ method. It includes strategy, branding, and marketing. So it's more kind of like a one-stop shop solutions to my client rather than just doing a PR. So I guess just out of interest that I wanted to help with more client to have more like holistic solutions. So that's how I started EQ. And the first 2 years I've been doing very well, again, because of, my passion. I just really like what I was doing with design and also like marketing. And my company just grew like rapidly. So from me, one person as a freelancer, I grew it to 5 full-time and 3 part-time in just a year and a half to 2 years. So it was really, really fast. And I think along the journey while I was building the company, I kind of lost sight of what's important to me I guess I started to lose sight of what's important to me anymore. because the company is growing so fast, and I feel like I was kind of like being consumed by the pace of Hong Kong, like, like the like the if I'm not growing fast enough, I'm not successful. Or like, like if even if I have like enough, like, like the a little bit of money in the bank, I feel like I need to start hiring people. And that with that experience, it was really, really valuable to me. So I guess, yeah, like and then I basically just start running EQ for like I guess like 5 to 6 years after that. And then finally I just hit my burnout like last year at the end of 2022. And I didn't even realize that I was having my burnout until my partner, because my partner also have a really serious burnout. And then he was the one who told me, he's like, look, like you're doing exactly what I was doing. And and he has been telling me for almost probably 8 months already. And I was just like, I'm fine, like just that's just how we should work in Hong Kong. And then at the end I was like, I really feel like I can't take it anymore. And I, obviously it's about me, and you talk a little bit about that before the show start, and you somehow feel like you're not yourself anymore. You just couldn't recognize yourself anymore. And then when you step back, you're like, oh my God, like I'm such a terrible person, like who I am. So I guess, yeah, that's basically the whole kind of, full background of how I have become who I am today. And I guess like as of this year, my another mission, and I'm actually launching another platform, is called the Aligned Entrepreneurs, which I'm passionate about helping more entrepreneurs to align with their values, and also like, working out a work-life balance lifestyle while helping them to build a brand, basically. Then that's kind of like my full journey, I guess, like career and life journey really in the past 10 years.
Wow, what an amazing journey. And I do want to go into the specifics about the burnout that you experienced last year in 2022. You pointed out that your partner said, hey, you're doing exactly what he did when he was burnt out. So I'm curious to know, what are some of the telling signs? And what really stood out to me was that when you said, oh, I don't recognize myself anymore, like I'm such a terrible person. And I think that sort of resonates with a lot of people who experienced burnout as well. It's like when they look back after the fact, they're like, wow, who was that person? It's like maybe their job or whatever that they were going through kind of brought out the worst in them, right? But for you, what are some of the signs that told you that you were actually burnt out?
I guess in regards to signs, I would probably separate it into emotional signs and physical signs. So obviously physical is I'm always really tired when I get home. Like whenever, at the end of the day, when I get home after dinner, me and my partner wanted to, just watch some TV and Netflix. I would never be able to finish one episode straight. I'll basically just pass out at the sofa. So that's one, constantly tired. And then, like you get like brain fog sometimes, headache. So those, I guess, would be like a physical signs. And I would consider myself a really healthy person because I really take care of myself, and I rarely get sick. I probably get sick like once every year, like to that frequency, or like sometimes it's like one every 2 years. So with like for me to have those symptoms, it's quite noticeable. So that's kind of like the physical sign, I would say, but emotional sign is probably more obvious to me. You always get like, I was always like really irritated. You get snappy, especially at work, you get really snappy all the time. Like, you can't really get any requests from anyone because you just feel like I've got a lot on my plate already, so I can't really deal with anything anymore. So I think that's probably one thing that people should really look out to. Like when you always feel like you're running out of time, and you always feel like you're very irritated no matter no matter what request is coming to your way, then like hopefully you don't really feel the true burnout yet, but that's probably the beginning of, if you don't really stop there, then, it's very easy to just get absorbed by it. So I definitely, that emotional sign is what I go through like every day. Like basically every day when I was at work. So I would say that. And then I guess you also feel like you don't really connect with people easily anymore, because you start to take things quite personally, and like you just don't really have the clarity and the calm mind to function really in life, I would say. So I guess that's probably the the major sign. Like And like I said, I think with the first 2 points, like, you get really snappy, you feel like you're always running out of time and irritated. I do feel like a lot of people in Hong Kong, we always have that. So yeah, thanks for having me to share this today. And I feel like I hope that my experience will really bring awareness to people that like burnout is not just like physical symptoms. If you emotionally feel like you are feeling a little bit overwhelmed, you should really start to take it slow and take care of yourself, because energy spread as well, so it's like toxic to spread these energies to people around you. So yeah.
I'm so curious, maybe later on in the conversation, we can talk a little bit about the step-by-step guide as for how you worked your way through your burnout. How did you get yourself out of that situation, right? Because I can imagine for people who are, let's say, burnt out from their jobs, it's not really straightforward, that they can't really put a hard stop to it, right? Sometimes like they will have to do some measures to kind of get themselves out of that mindset before they reassess, oh, should I really be in this job? If I shouldn't, what should I do to get out of it? So I'm so curious to hear your experience about like how the first step is that realizing that you're burnt out, but then what goes after is what really matters. But I also find it, I don't know if it's specific to Hong Kong, but then you did mention when you first experienced burnout, you were kind of thinking that that's how people work in Hong Kong. Like you're supposed to have those kinds of symptoms, right? And I think what will be really helpful is to tell our listeners or help our listeners really identify, are they burnt out or are they just really experiencing the parts that suck about working? Like how can they really identify like, oh, you really need help, you really need to look at the problem straight on now?
I guess if the feelings persist over a long period of time, and I always like to kind of, if you really wanted to kind of have a really good understanding about how you are actually feeling now, then try to give yourself a pause and really try to observe yourself as a third person. That's how I did it. Like, because I was so absorbed by all these emotions, and I'm the emotion, right? So I started to do a lot of meditation, which I also struggled to do like really good meditation as well, because your brain is just like, it just wouldn't stop, right? So, but then I kind of just like, I wouldn't say force myself, but I try to be quite disciplined in doing that, because I just know that it's just not normal. Like, why am I always so, like frustrated? Like, and even like when the client sent me like one little request, I'll be like, sorry, no, like, I can't, I'm busy, can't do it. And I just didn't really like that me, like, that version of me. So I guess, if you try to consciously observe yourself as a third person and really try to see, oh, am I doing that? Is that, am I doing that right? And, do I have, am I usually like that? And like, is that unreasonable for people to send a request like that? And then I think it's the first step that how you can really identify if you're, being unreasonable, I guess. Like, because I guess like burnout people, they tend to be quite unreasonable.
I want to also ask, because also burnt out people would tend to think that I don't have time to meditate, I don't have time to journal. Like, stop telling me that I need to allocate even more time to do something that doesn't accomplish anything. So have you had that?
For sure. I think I definitely have the resistance at first, but then it just gets to a point it's so out of hand, and I just know that I need it. So so actually that brings me to my next sharing that you actually wanted to ask as well. Like, how did I get into, like healing myself and, fixing my burnout? It's so I actually put a hard stop on work towards end of last year. And I just kind of like messaged all my client, and I said, I would love to take a whole week off. And I actually rented a Airbnb in Sai Kung, and I basically just hire myself there. So I was like telling my partner, this is what I need. And I just basically didn't pack my computer, nothing, just bring myself and then just go. And I was like completely switch off, off WhatsApp, off everything. Because I just feel that, I think at that point, it's almost getting to a point where I'm like, I just can't have any noise in my head anymore. I just need to clear my head. Like I just need to, ground myself and just find myself again. So that's basically what I did. So I just basically put a hard stop and just really try to come back to myself and try to reflect. And there are a few questions that I also ask myself during that retreat as well, and the time that I spend myself. And I was trying to ask myself, what is my definition of success? Because I think a lot of people, we got drawn into what the society tells us, having more is successful, or like having something fast means you are good. But it's not the case, right? Like I think everybody should have their own definition of success. So that's basically how I that's the first question that I asked myself. Basically, the first 2 days I was just kind of like resting because I was really tired, and the third day I feel like I'm mentally ready to answer like heavy questions like that. So I was just like asking myself a lot of why, like why did I behave in that way, and and obviously I felt that it's not worth it because me and my partner relationship was affected as well. It impacted our relationship. I didn't really have any energy for him. I didn't really have any energy for my family, friends. So I was trying to reflect a lot of like, how I've behaved in the last year, and what is important to me. Why do I work so hard to, why do I work so hard to build my agency, and what is it for? So that's the moment where I realized, I've totally lost sight of why I started. And, and I think it throughout the journey, it just kind of like become a number games rather than I genuinely wanted to do something I like doing. So I think when you get lost into the number games, you just kind of lost the meaning of how you first started, right? Like I think at some point I'm just kind of like taking whatever client comes to me rather than the client that I feel like I can really, really, connect with, or like I can really, really help them with. Because it's, it just becomes like really, everything just become really superficial, basically. So another biggest realizations that I realized is that I have to, and I guess overall in the past 10 years, my biggest realizations is I have to find something that aligns with my values. Like I feel like values is something that I would always want to stick it close to my heart. And it's very easy when we live in a city that fast paced, like we get absorbed by the society expectation and the society, like rules. And then not that we would lose our values, but we would easily forget, what's important to us. So I think till this point, this is the biggest thing that I would say I'm really grateful that I have found these, like my core values that is going to be stick to me really close to my heart. Like every day when I decided whatever decision that I'm going to make in my life or like career, I'm going to stick with that. And which, like this year I have kind of like restructured my life and my work situation as well. And I'm happier than ever. And like I just know that like I'm living with my values every day. And it's just, it's just like, it just makes you feel that you are very fulfilled, and also like you're not really following others people, again, like definition of success, or like following other people's pace, really. Yeah
it's so true that everyone should have that exercise of asking themselves, like you mentioned, what you went through. How do you define success? What does success look like to you individually? And also map out your purpose. And from there, you will be able to think of some tangible steps, or like think of where you should be to make you feel fulfilled, right? And I do want to share a little bit about my personal experience with burnout as well. And for the longest time, I wasn't even sure if I was burnt out until what you just talked about. I was like, oh my God, like I had almost the same symptoms, but it was also kind of like the moment of realization for me was when I realized I got really irritated whenever people ask me questions, like even like, oh, what do you want to eat? And I would just kind of like snap at them and be like, why are you asking me this question? Why do I need to think of what to eat? Why can't you make it easier for me? But then it's like usually these really harmless questions, or even like, where are you? I'm like, why are you pushing me to be wherever I have to be? I'm like, it's like, just leave me, right? But then those are really harmless questions, and they might be coming from friends, loved ones, or even people who mean well. And I was noticing that I was snapping at these people who actually matter because of work. And that was kind of like a warning sign for me. It's like, okay, like we have a problem here. Like I might need to adjust a little bit. And then like you mentioned, brain fog was almost kind of like a daily occurrence, headaches and all, like those are the physical symptoms. And at some point I was also very negative because I couldn't really tell. I think that really resonates with how you mentioned like you couldn't really connect with people for real, because that's when I was really confused. I couldn't really tell if people meant well or they just wanted something from me. Like they just wanted me to accomplish yet another deadline for them, or like they wanted me to do something to make themselves feel good, or maybe even, let's say, use my hard work to make themselves look good. So that's when I would feel very defensive in a way. Like whenever people come my way, my first question would be like, what do you want? Right?
Yeah.
And then, I mean, there were some thoughts that went through my head. Like, I would always think like, okay, if I'm nice to this person, I'm sending an open invitation for this person to disrespect my time even more, or to kind of like cross my boundaries, or like maybe it's just like if I'm nice to this person, then I would be allowing them to reschedule last minute or dump the responsibilities onto me. So these were kind of the thoughts that were really dominating my head. And it wasn't until when I started telling my partner about it or my friends about it, they were like, okay, those are really unhealthy thoughts to be having like 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have that time to get myself out of that mindset. And I just felt really trapped. And then what's specific to that environment that I was in was also there's this whole like general element of distrust among colleagues or like team members. For example, like if you tell them that you're busy, it actually meant nothing to them. They wouldn't believe that you are actually unavailable. Like they would only leave you alone unless if you told them that, okay, I'm sick, I'm at a hospital. That's when they would kind of like, oh, okay, I'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
But then when you're like, okay, my plate is pretty full, like I can't really entertain your requests anymore, they would still say things like, oh, they don't believe you. So that was kind of the environment that I was dealing with. And then that environment kind of like brought out the worst in me. So this is kind of like my personal experience with burnout.
How did you get past that?
It was a very tough process because, you know, whenever you're burnt out, you're just so confused and your brain is just so foggy most of the time and you're so irritated, you don't even have time for yourself, right? But then I think when there are some brief moments that I could really look at myself, maybe from a third person's point of view, I realized, wait, I need to stop being nice to people. Like I need to kind of draw some boundaries. I need to practice saying no because that's essentially a muscle that you have to train.
Yeah.
Especially having worked in Asia for quite some time, you know that saying no is scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think especially the culture in Hong Kong, like, you know, I often bring this example up. Previously, I often feel guilty if I have more than 1 hour lunch because I feel like I'm not productive enough. But again, I think it's just a culture. I think that's why it's really helpful to, you know, I think if anyone who is listening to this and you're struggling to identify if you're burning out or not, just ask yourself questions like, you know, like what's your definition of success? And just try to identify like the emotional and physical sign that we just talk about. And I think it's a really powerful questions to kind of pull yourself away from the city's expectation and the city's pace. We should be the one who determine the pace, right? So I understand it's a little bit tricky for people who work, you know, like for a company, but still, like, you know, if you ask yourself what's your definition of success, you'll be able to figure out if the company is suitable for you in long term or short term. So, and
that reminds me, one other tool or one other thing that helped me to do a bit of that mindset shift was at some point I got acquainted with this Buddhist text called the Heart Sutra. And growing up, you know, like the Heart Sutra is something that your mom or your grandma would carry a card in their wallet. And then for the longest time as a kid, I was like, okay, this is such a weird piece of text. It's just like I would never understand that. But until maybe a few years back, I got the chance to watch a show curated by a really talented creative director in Hong Kong. And he essentially used like visual effects, music, like Western classical music, and some stage design and everything, and interpret the Heart Sutra for audiences who aren't really familiar with Buddhism. That was the first moment that I was like, wow, this is such a beautiful piece of text. And what that inspired me as I studied more about that text was like one of the prominent concept was the concept of emptiness in Buddhism. Essentially, how it goes is everything in this world is empty, and how that translates into the professional setting is, oh, your work title, any awards that you have could be empty because we all came to this world with nothing, and we're gonna leave this world with nothing, right? And the source of pain in Buddhism is really when you are in pursuit of something for the sake of it. So that was when I really looked into every aspect of my life. It's like, oh, for the longest time I thought I wanted to, let's say, pursue that very job promotion or that very job title. But then when I really questioned myself, like, why do I want that? That's when I realized, oh, because society told me that I wanted that. But what does that do to my personal development or to my life? In the grand scheme of things, that promotion is not going to do anything to my happiness or overall fulfillment. So in the end, I mean, it's kind of like an extreme ways, like if you look at everything as empty, right? But then it really forces you to be selective and just think of like what really matters to you. Like if it's not going to contribute to your overall happiness, then it's empty.
Yeah. And no, I like that. I think it's kind of just forced you to think about and decide more consciously, right?
Yeah.
And I love having me time like every now and then as well. And I think it's really healthy for relationship to do that as well. And I feel like especially in Hong Kong, like we're always so fast. You know, like going on holiday for more than 2 weeks, people would be like, wow, so long. Like, you know, like it's crazy. Like this, I always feel like this is crazy. Like, you know, like we don't come to this world to just work. Like, you know, like work should be a part of a tool to support the lifestyle that we want to live. So I think it should be the other way around. It shouldn't be, you know, the Hong Kong culture is like we're totally creating our work, and then it's just kind of like, you know, we just basically fall into this whole work culture, and that's our life. And yeah, I guess like in alone time really, I think it's really, really beneficial. And I also love to have all these like why questions as well. Like, and I think a lot of the time, like, you know, when we go into the pace of the city and go with the pace of other people, we forget to really take care of ourselves and ask ourselves like questions like this. To be honest, the questions that I ask myself is not like, you know, it's not like a difficult, like really hard questions that I need to research online for like 100 hours to find. It's just really simple questions, but we don't even have time to understand this ourselves. How crazy is that? And I think like having these like self-inquiry time, it's really important to just help you to figure out how you want to lead your life, instead of just get absorbed by, you know, like the society pace and expectations, really.
Yeah, I know that after your burnout experience, you also started helping out other entrepreneurs with finding better work-life balance. And there's a very specific case study about an entrepreneur feeling a bit burnt out. Would you like to share with us, and what kind of solutions did you come up with for this person?
Yeah, so I would say this approach, it's basically what led me to start my new platform called the Aligned Entrepreneur, and specifically the case study that you have just mentioned. So I've met this girl like last year, I think sometimes towards the end of last year, and she was basically going through a really severe burnout, and really talented girl. Like she's got like, you know, feature like all over like Hong Kong magazines and stuff like that, and really, really successful company. Small startup as well. And, you know, as we all know, like being a startup, it means that you need to do everything yourself. And so she wasn't the exceptional. She kind of have to, you know, wear like a lot of different hats in the company. And yeah, and then we basically met, and I kind of started to, I think with my approach, I instead of trying to help client, or, you know, whatever you call it, like coaching client or like student, to help them to build a brand with branding and marketing expertise. So obviously that's my background, and I would love to leverage that, and wanted to help with brand, like more meaningful brand, to, you know, obviously like amplify their impact in the community. Like, so other than that side of, you know, expertise that I can contribute, the first step that I actually would take them through is to sit them down and basically going through and ask them all these why questions, like why did you want to start this company, what's your personal goal, And I wanted to help them to be clear about, why did you want to start this company? What is it for? And I think a lot of people probably they won't have this time, or they won't have the space to really think about questions like this. So I think it's really important. I would really wanted to connect with, my client on more like a deeper level. So then I would know what kind of brand that I should help them to build up, and using what strategy, and knowing their personality, because I think even like with branding and marketing, there are different way that we can play around with. So I think that's a really good way for me to kind of get connected to the client, and also knowing that their personal goal, what kind of lifestyle that they wanted to live as well. I think when I ask, even including myself, like when I asked myself, like what kind of lifestyle that I wanted to live, and like often people would say, I want to be able to travel. I don't know, like 3 weeks every 6 months, or like that's ideal. Like at least don't work on the weekend. I guess it, especially for Hong Kong people, sometimes working on the weekend is quite normal, we would say. So a lot of my clients would come to me and said, like, at first they would say, at least I don't want it to work on the weekend, and then I will gradually help them to kind of like balance their week to first not working on the weekend, and then like Friday off as well, or even just like like work 4.5 days. So I think it's pretty scary when you first start, because you're like, oh, even 1 hour I can do a lot already. But then I think with basically with my experience and getting them to try it with my support on their side, they would realize how important it is to rest, and it's actually productive to rest, and you recharge yourself, and you come back being a better boss, being a better employee, being a better person around everyone. So that's basically the first step that I would help them to go through, and try to make I guess kind of like help them to look through the company structure, and then see like if is there anything you need to delegate, and just try to really help them to squeeze out some times for them to take care of themselves, really. And the other really important part is to help them to identify their values. So for example, in this very specific case study, I like the client of mine, she has identified friendship is really important to her. So it's one of her biggest value, actually. Without friendship, she feels like, especially she's entrepreneur in Hong Kong, but she was born somewhere else. So her family, main family is not really here, and she feel like friendship is her support group. So I started to encourage her and said, like, you should take between Monday and Friday, go to have coffee with your friends. And that would basically make you feel a bit more compensated being an entrepreneur, and then you will feel like you're actually living a life. So I think all these little things is really, really important. Like it sounds very easy, but it's very hard to do, because you feel like you're kind of like, oh, am I not being productive enough? And so I think just kind of like throughout this journey, like now she's much happier than before, and she's having a much more like work-life balance kind of lifestyle. So Monday to Friday, she's still meeting friends for coffee until this point. And she, another thing that she really helps her is to get in touch with nature. So on the weekend, sometimes you go to the beach, and she stopped working on the weekend now, sometimes off Friday as well. So a lot of changes. So I think she realized how important incorporating all these things in is going to help her company to grow. Because one really crazy example is that like the time when she was like grinding nonstop, her company statistic actually dropped. Oh, wow. Because she was not really in the right place to do that. But ever since we started to work together, her company statistic really started to grow up a lot. So the numbers tell, and obviously she feels like she's much more capable of being a good boss, and like much more capable of like managing people. And she's also started to, like you said, like I think saying no is an art, right? Like especially for people like us working in Hong Kong. So that's something that I'm also helping her to practice as well. And I try to identify if there is any meeting that you can say no, or just not meet in person, just get on a call and be a bit more straightforward. And you don't have to be like meeting for coffee like every time, and just like identifying all these little things. That's basically the foundation of getting the lifestyle like more balanced. And then basically we will work on the brand building. So that's kind of like two parts of the coaching approach, I would say.
It's a very useful framework because, I mean, like you mentioned a lot, like people who work in Hong Kong or people in Hong Kong, we know that saying no is very scary. And even like whenever people ask, let's say like a potential client or a potential new contact asks to meet up for coffee, you would think that it's impossible to say no. But then I think that's just something you have to do whenever you just feel a bit overwhelmed, because even if you say yes, you drag yourself there. Like the person can really feel your energy that you're not really up for it or you're not really at the top of your game, and the person won't feel inspired by you and won't want to work with you, right?
Yeah. No, I think like there were experiences that I'll be having coffee with someone and then they just constantly check the phone. And I just feel like they're not with me, you know? So, and another thing that I always encourage my clients to do is to space out, to pace out the meetings. So at least like, you know, having 15 minutes break in between, that really helps. Because I honestly feel like, based on my experience, obviously I used to do that as well, like back-to-back meeting. I felt that it's very unfair for the next person because I'm bringing all these like previous like meeting energy, and like, you know, my brain is full of all those like meeting notes and conversations and things I need to follow up, and bringing into the next clients. I just feel like it's not fair for them. So I would think like the first step is to basically pace out the meetings every day, and then also start to say no. I think that would really free everyone's with like time, and also like try to be smart about not going around town like too much. So for me, it's like my Monday, it's basically my most heavy working day. So I'll have all the, you know, all the heavy work that I need to check on Monday. Wednesday is my coaching day. I meet all my coaching clients. Tuesday is also the day where I work on stuff, like basically work from home. So any kind of like big tasks, Monday, Tuesday is the day for me. Wednesday, Thursday is my coaching client day. So I go and meet client. And then Friday is basically my thinking day. So all my clients and all my staff, they know Friday is the day where they can't message me. So I basically keep my Friday as the day where I, you know, either I study or like, you know, I read books related to the industry, or sometimes even if I feel tired, then I'm just not going to do anything. I just won't feel guilty because, yeah, like why should we? You know, why should we feel guilty? I need to take care of my own health first, because if I can't take care of my own health first, how am I going to take care of everything else? So I guess Friday is just more kind of like fluid, and I'm also practicing how I wanted to listen to my body as well, and just try to see what I'm, you know, how my energy level is that day, and decide what I'm going to do that day.
Yeah, that's so true. And I mean, obviously, the first time or the second time when you tell people that, let's say Fridays, they can't really reach you, it might take a bit of time for them to get used to, but eventually you also have to let them become familiar with like, that's your habit, that's how you are. And then eventually people will learn, okay, like, yeah, on Fridays we don't bother her. But of course, a lot of the examples or maybe tips that we just talked about are a little bit more specific to entrepreneurs. But then I'm sure for the majority of our listeners, they kind of are on that daily grind. They have a full-time job, maybe they work in corporate. So would you have any like tips for people who are in this kind of full-time job where if they are not entrepreneurs, they don't have as much autonomy over their time, and then maybe they also work in maybe some sort of Asian workplace where they value the time spent at work rather than how efficient they are? Because I think one of the observations that I've made working in Hong Kong is that people definitely value working hard rather than working smart.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think definitely the first top skill is to politely say no. I mean, like, even though I'm running my own thing, like I still, you know, I still have people I need to report to. So my clients would still message me on Friday sometimes, or even when I'm traveling. So, you know, I'm the same as people who actually work for a company. So I would say the first top skill is just to really try to identify, like, obviously, you know, people might think, oh, am I rude saying no? And, you know, like, how can I actually practice and be polite about it, but at the same time, it doesn't really come across rude. I think it takes some time for me to also practice it as well. But like, obviously, you kind of need to communicate very politely why you were saying no. Like, you can't just be like, you know, no, I'm not doing it, right? Like, you know, you need to explain it and politely, and also, you know, I guess like you're not going to say no every day as well. Like, you know, for rest of the time, you know, just try to stay professional and just try to be as helpful as possible. I think in general, if you're very, you know, people know you are very helpful, and also like, you know, like always try to go above and beyond most of the time, they will give you a break. Like, when you say no, they will know, okay, there is a reason why. So I guess it's not just the tips of say no, but obviously, you also need to give your integrity to the company as well, like for rest of the time. So,
and one thing that's related to your business, I know you have a creative agency, and we know that agencies are known for being one of the hardest work environments out there. Burnt out is a personality. People would see, working overtime and having no time for anything as kind of something that's normal. So I'm wondering, like, what's your take on this? And now, as a business owner who runs an agency, do you make any conscious effort to make it better for your team?
Yeah, I try to always revisit my working schedule with them. So when I first started, it was pretty long hours. Basically, I started 9 to 7, so it's long. And then I consciously try to change it to 10 to 6, and then now it's like 11 to 6 basically. So, and I also allow I encourage my team members to go for a break, and like I think as long as they can get the task done, then it's fine. And, they can basically choose wherever they work, and, and I guess it's just like trust and, understanding basically. I think when I was having my burnout, like you said, like I think the common pattern is you don't trust people. Like you just become like, like, oh, why are you doing it this way? And you're not really doing the way that I want you to do. And I think I just realized the energy is coming from me first, and I'm more conscious about how my energy is being spread. So I'm really consciously trying to take care of my own mental space, so then I can make a better decision for my team. Like, how could they work this week? If we're having this schedule, and I think just like communicate upfront as well. And we are always like communicating every day as well, and having like really kind of like plan in advance kind of like schedule, so everyone can kind of communicate, and I guess just be a little bit more organized would be really, really helpful. And yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And since I talked a little bit about that Buddhist text earlier, I know that there's also another ancient Chinese text that kind of gave you some inspiration about how you approach work. And it's this specific piece of text is by ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. I'm so curious about your take on this and what you learned from it.
Yeah, I would say I'm very passionate about learning different religion. So what you said to me wasn't, a strange thing. And I just love exploring the beauty of like different religions. So I think, yeah, like Tao, like Lao Tzu, it's definitely another religion that I have explored. I think the biggest takeaway from Lao Tzu is definitely yin and yang. So which is like finding the balance, and I'm actually practicing it consciously as well, like every day, and trying to basically incorporate. And how like in our culture we like to explore like different like holistic health kind of like supplements, or like Chinese medicine. So I'm kind of exploring that in a food kind of like substance form, and try to incorporate into. And I think whatever we eat, it really impact how we like how we function every day. So I guess that's kind of like a more in-depth, like not just like mental strategy. Like I will probably start with food, and then also like, yeah, like that's definitely the yin and yang. I definitely feel like people who are burnout, obviously we're overstimulated by the yang energy, and that's why we need to have a little bit of yin energy to bring in, which is like like quiet, silence, slow pace, and I think that's kind of like the philosophy that I've been incorporating. So I wouldn't say, like I always emphasize, I wouldn't say like my approach is to encourage slow living, because I think too slow is also not good. It's to encourage balanced living. So for example, the case study that I've just mentioned to you, like my client, sometimes she would feel like very tired and like no motivation. So I would then encourage her to go for a run. So I think that's kind of like how we should see. It's not about always just about like resting or like, not doing anything. You need to be really conscious about how to listen to your body and just try to diagnose and give yourself the right medicine.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes your body can do tricks like, oh, you're tired, you don't want to move. But then really, sometimes when you really drag yourself up, and if you just do weird dance moves to kind of like shake it up a little bit, like you feel better instantly.
Yeah.
So that's an incredible tip. But now it's time for us to move on to our special segment, which is Burnout Emergency Room with Mandy Pao. And in this segment, I'll be asking Mandy all the common burning questions related to burnout and mental health. So, Mandy, are you ready?
Ready?
All right. First common question. I'm stuck in a toxic workplace. What can I do?
I think first thing is to identify your own definition of success and your values. And by identifying those, you will pretty much know what you need to do.
The second question is, what do you do when you don't have 3 pairs of hands and 5 brains, but 7 different people are chasing you for different things they deem urgent?
Practice how to say no politely.
Yeah. And the next one, what to do when you have a manager who micromanages?
I think you should try to understand why she doesn't trust you, and maybe try to come from her perspective of, like understanding her daily life. I think always like trying to understand each other's would give each other's a little bit more empathy. But obviously, that wouldn't be a daily practice, right? I think like try to understand her a little bit more, and if it gets really out of the hand, then just try to speak to her. And just try to speak to her with empathy as well. Try to really communicate with her.
Yeah, I think one very useful tip other people have also mentioned is that don't think that you're powerless in this situation. Don't think that you're always the victim. You can always turn things around by maybe taking control. Let's say, hey, can we have a talk? I think we have an ongoing problem. Don't shy away from those difficult conversations.
100%. And I think it's not necessarily you're trying to confront your manager. It's just open communications. Every relationship, if a challenge comes, you kind of need to talk through it. If not, then, one side will be feeling, why am I being treated that way? And maybe the other side of person, it's like a romantic relationship, right? Any kind of relationship needs communications, really. Like either with your parents, your friends, your colleague, and your manager will be not an exceptional relationship, I guess.
That's so true. I guess when it plays into that whole like Asian context, it's also a lot harder for people to talk about their feelings, or like even people in the workplace would think feelings have no place in the professional settings. But sometimes actually how your teammates feel can play a very critical part in terms of the overall productivity as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And the next one is, I don't have time for anything.
Make time for it. Make time for it. Like I think like when we start to have this thought, I don't have time for anything, it's really when you need to make time for it, because you're on the edge of really burning out. Like you really need to. But I think I've been through that. I went through a period of time where I was like, I really don't have time for anything. But I think it will get to a point where you realize, okay, I need to make time for something. And that's how I've basically started to be like, okay, I need to make 10 minutes every day just for meditation. I'll wake up 15 minutes earlier and just try to make time for it. But I think it depends on what phase you are. If you're not like seriously on the edge of burnout, probably you'll still be like, a little bit resistant, but probably will get to that point. But obviously you don't want to wait till you get to that point to realize this, right? So I guess having, like I said, like really straight answer is like try to just make time for it, because that's basically the first sign of your body and your mind telling you, you really need to make time for yourself. Yeah.
That's true. Meditate like your life depends on it.
Yeah.
And finally, I am so burnt out. Should I quit my job?
I think you need to first identify, I think it relates back to the first questions. You need to first identify your definition of success and your values. Then you'll be able to answer if you should quit your job or not. Like, are you truly enjoying your job? Does it really align with your value? Does it support your definition of success? If it does, then stick with your job. It probably will just be temporary, because you love your job, and it gives you the what you want in life, right? But if it really doesn't align, then I think the answer is very clear.
Those are some really nice tips for you guys to digest. a little bit as you navigate through life and burnout. Thank you so much for answering all the questions in this segment. Now, for us to close out the episode, for those who would like to follow your work or know more about your upcoming projects, where can they find you? And are there any exciting initiatives that you're currently working on?
Yeah, so I have 2 events coming up. I am actually teaching at Ritz-Carlton for a work-life balance workshop in October. And I will also have another workshop that I will be teaching at Garage Society in November as well. So anyone who wants to find out more details can just go to my Instagram, which is the THE Mandy Pao, MANDY PAO. So that's my Instagram handle. And because my platform is the Aligned Entrepreneur is completely new, so I'm actually in the process of building up the website. Having said that, like, if it's the old Mandy, like, the website will already be here, and it will be already like published like probably back in January. But because this year I just really wanted to go with the flow and try to grow everything more organically, so that's why like the website, I'm still basically working in progress, and there's no rush for me to really launch anything in rush, really. So yeah.
I love that approach. And finally, for us to leave the episode, Mandy, what does it mean to be proudly Asian to you?
I think not letting the society tells you about who you should be, and you just kind of create your own definition. That's probably my take on it.
Nice. Thank you so much for joining us on Proudly Asian, Mandy.
Thanks for having me again.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.